essentially carries her out in like a fireman's lift. Is that a fireman's lift? I don't know what a fireman's, I just used a phrase, I don't even know what it means. He's like holding her like a dog, not a dog. Hello, I'm Raye. Welcome back to Whiskey on my Kindle. If you've never watched this channel, I drink a lot of whiskey and I talk about books. We've got our whiskey, got our books, and I'm going to be doing my very super late, because July's almost over, June wrap up. Aren't we excited? This month I read, hold on, I have to count. Oh my goodness, I started this video late and I'm not even prepared. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I read 11 books. Whoa! 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I read 11 books. Well, no wonder I wasn't making videos, guys. I was reading, guys. I'll start off with something I was reading with my partner. I think I mentioned it in May. He and I were reading The Six of Crows duology, and we read and finished Crooked Kingdom. Crooked Kingdom, I give a 4 out of 5 stars, which is really good for me. I love the Six of Crows duology, but this is the last time I'm gonna say it, because I realize when I look through my videos, it seems like this account is just a Six of Crows stan account, which it kinda is, but also I don't know if I like it that much in real life. I always thought Crooked Kingdom was my favorite out of the 2 books. I think the first book did really well delving deeper into the characters' histories, and the second book just kind of topped off those details, but didn't add anything more than a little more depth. I actually really like the first book a lot better. I do think Crooked Kingdom is funnier because by this point the characters all have a history. They have their own personalities in the first book, but this time they've been through something already together, so it's much funnier with their dynamic and there's a lot more tension and banter to play with. Definitely recommend this duology. Not gonna mention it again. I'm done talking about Six of Crows. The second book I read was White Rage, The Unspoken Truth of Our Racial Divide. I give this 5 stars. There's so much in this book. I read this for the Blackout buddy read. There's not much I can say more for nonfiction, but it's such an important one because it goes through US history again as you were not taught. It looks at it from a completely different perspective. So again, when we think about US history books, they're all written from the hero white US perspective. It's really interesting to go through American history. It's the history of Black people in America and their oppression and how it was born and how it's born from white rage. How white rage essentially is born from any Black success. It just hones in on very specific history that's not told in US classrooms. There are moments and definitely people that are similar to what you would find in US history classrooms, not in the narrative that this writer goes through it. It's really important to read because it's now we're at the time where everybody needs to kind of relearn history. Hamilton doesn't count. The next book I read was White Fragility, Why It's So Hard for White People to Talk About Racism. I read this as well for the Blackout buddy read. Essentially, if you're just white, you need to read this book. In my April wrap-up, I think I mentioned why I'm no longer talking to white people about race. If you're just starting to enter racial discussions and you don't know like language, you don't know where you're supposed to stand, you don't know how you're supposed to engage because you don't feel informed enough, start with those 2 books. Start with White Fragility to teach yourself where you stand on everything. Whether or not you want to take a position on anything in regards to race in your society, you have a position. Whether or not you want to take it, it's already there for you. White Fragility is a good how to approach these discussions, how to look at these discussions, how to affirm someone else's opinion before you insert your own and your own outlook, and how it's not about you. It's really good how to, essentially. And Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race is a really good counter to that, where it's somewhat UK based because it follows along the narrative of people saying that there's not racism in the UK like there is in the US, which is absolute bullshit. But it's a comment on that and using that history to then inform you of racial conversations in daily life and in feminism and in class and things that we see in day-to-day life. But yeah, White Fragility was super eye-opening to me in some ways and then definitely not in others. I think people of color, when they read this book, won't be too, I mean, a lot of it seems like, whoa, I didn't even realize that could be racist, and you're like, yeah, that's why my heart sinks every time those conversations come up or something like that is said. But in the ways that I found it really useful is the language. So the language of this whole book, she's so blunt, but she's also dumbing everything down to a point, and I don't mean this in a condescending way because it is what it is. Like, some people grow up being very aware that race is an issue in their entire lives. Other people never realize that it's an issue in a very genuine manner. This is nothing new. I found this very interesting because the language is so dumbed down that I feel like I can use this in conversations when discussing racist acts in real life. This book was written by a white woman for white people. I feel like people of color can use this language to insert in real life. Specific examples that she uses that can help the person that you're trying to have a discussion with really see it from your point of view without them, you know, crumbling from fragility, which I think is important to read this book because white people need to address that fragility in order for these conversations to be fruitful. The next book I read was Once Ghosted, Twice Shy. This is a romance. This is a short one. It's 106 pages. It is wonderful. I am a bit dumb though because I didn't read the first book. This is like a, what do you call it, novella, when it's like 1.5. And I feel like I need to know these characters, and I should have known these characters a bit because of the first book. But regardless, I really enjoyed the book. If anything, it just makes me want to keep reading the series, which I will continue to read the series. I just wanted something like short and sweet, and I wanted to inject some romance into my June because my June was looking like a lot of nonfiction, and it kind of continues that way for a bit. I rated this one 3 out of 5 stars. I really liked it. I thought it was really cute. It's very New York City. It's all about being in New York, and it made me miss New York for a minute. So the book is essentially about these two women who were dating, I think a year before, because of some personal shit that went down. One of them ghosted the other, and now they're meeting again on a New York City subway train. So it did feel a little bit like things could have just got solved if they communicated a little bit more, but their dynamics and the whole reason why they are as tense as they are is because they're not comfortable enough to share these things with each other. It's a whole thing. The next book I read was Take a Hint, Dani Brown. Jeez. Oh, I was waiting for this book for so long. I read Get a Life, Chloe Brown. I thought it was okay. I didn't really like the characters very much. I did think the writing was funny. My favorite character was the cat. I don't mean like as an insult at all. I just, everything that had to do with the cat and Chloe's relationship I thought was hilarious. I didn't really like Red. Dani and Zafir, like, I missed romances because of this, and I'm not really big on when's the next book coming out, but I had pre-ordered this shit. I was ready. I just loved it. 5 out of 5 stars. I love these very few romances where I'm like, yes, this is, if anybody asks what one of your top favorite romances are, it's this one. Zafir is sensitive, but also like so honest and straightforward about his mental health, like his anxiety. And you've got Dani, who's like this crazy-haired bisexual academic who's just like curvy and just, already it just sounds amazing, right? But the banter, the writer's so good at writing this kind of banter. Mwah. My favorite chemical mix in making a perfect romance is you have to have a lot of banter, and it needs to work. It needs to work because the chemistry between the two characters is like off the charts. It has to have a lot of steam, and it has to have some angst in it, if not a lot of angst. So this book is about Dani, who is a PhD student and works at the university that Zaf is a security guard of, and they're going through a drill. Dani gets herself in a situation where Zaf essentially carries her out in like a fireman's lift. Is that a fireman's lift? I don't know what a fireman's, I just used a phrase, I don't even know what it means. He's like holding her like a dog, not a dog. He's holding her. Oh my gosh, just look at the cover. I'm gonna have the cover right there. You're gonna see it. He holds her and all the university students start taking pictures. Suddenly they start trending. They could get some good use out of this, and then they've got a fake relationship, and fake relationship trope, well executed. Guys, it was really funny. I thought the conclusion and their like makeup was a bit cheesy, but I loved it. I mean, I really loved it, and I really enjoyed every moment of this, and I really can't wait for each one of these books in the next series. And so this has actually sparked me to read the writer's other work. So I'm reading a paranormal romance right now, which I think I found an author that I'm just going to continue to read. The next book I read was My Sister, the Serial Killer. This one is about 2 sisters. I know, surprise, surprise. One of them is a serial killer. I know, I'm just coming out with them. You're like, what? I never saw that coming. So the protagonist gets a call from her sister who has killed yet another one of her boyfriends. They go clean up the body, dust off their hands, keep moving forward. And obviously our protagonist is struggling with the moral code of all this. So our protagonist, Raye, is working in the hospital, and her sister comes and starts to set eyes on a potential new boyfriend who is Raye's friend and longtime crush. So the book starts off with that being our main plot, because how is she going to keep her sister from him, and whether or not he likes her sister, and all these things. It's not as romantically inclined as I just made it sound. It's a lot deeper than that, and I think it's really interesting because a lot of people didn't like this book. I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars. I listened to this on audiobook and I really liked it. The problem is I think it's marketed as a murder mystery suspense thriller, and a lot of people in Goodreads had like ticked that as like to read murder mystery suspense thriller. It's not any of those things. If anything, I would say it's just like a contemporary fiction. It has a murder aspect. It's not at all thrillery. I think it would be more thrillery if the serial killer sister was a bit more malicious, but it's more about almost their psychology, their childhood, and their sisterhood dynamics. And so you deal with the protagonist really struggling with her loyalty that's been beaten and instilled in her for her family, and being responsible for her younger sister, and her dealing with what that means when her moral code is then tested. How loyal is she to her than her friend who she's had a long time crush on and whose life is possibly in danger, and how far will she go to be responsible for her sister. Iola's personality is really interesting because of how she grew up, and she was always the beautiful one, and how each of them had a different relationship with men. And by the way, like, men don't do well in this book at all. Every man is either after a woman for her body, mistreating them, cheating on them, dying. Duh, they're not doing well in this book, so no complaints from me. Moving on. The next book I read was Idiot Brain, What Your Head is Really Up To. So I think I mentioned this one in my stay-at-home book tag, but I finally finished it. It's a book that I've been reading for something like a year, but it's really funny. Like, it's actually a really good book. It's written by a neuroscientist who just breaks down what your brain is up to. The next book I read was The Queen's Glory and the Pussy's Box, which is a poetry book. I sometimes go on YouTube and watch spoken word poetry. Poets that perform on YouTube are just, oh god, there's so many good ones, absolutely so many good ones, and that's really where I find a lot of my poetry from. And this is Ebony Stewart. Ebony Stewart is such a good poet. I rated this book 5 out of 5 stars. Just so many really beautiful poems, so powerful. I'm going to link videos to Ebony's performances down below. The next book I read was All Boys Aren't Blue. All Boys Aren't Blue is a series of personal essays by George M. Johnson, who is a journalist and part of the LGBTQIA+ community and is an activist as well. He writes personal essays just about dealing with the struggles of figuring out his gender identity, the struggles of toxic masculinity in his own childhood, about being Black, about consent, and about confusing childhood sexual experiences. Like, there's so much in here, and even like the support of family members. I've laughed, I've smiled, I cried, I mainly cried a lot. I highly recommend this one. The next book I read was This Is Going to Hurt, Secret Diaries of a Junior Doctor. But Raye, you read that book already. I know, I read it again with my partner. He really wanted to read it, so I read it. 5 out of 5 stars for me. But if you want to see anything more about that book, I will link my May wrap-up up here, so you can click on that. Really good book, non-fiction, about a doctor, really funny, very quick read. The last book I read was Natives, Race and Class in the Ruins of Empire. So this book is written by Kala, who's like a mixed race British rapper. He's like everything. He's a rapper, journalist, author, activist, poet, who essentially wants to address racism in the UK. So he addresses race in Britain with such an in-depth understanding of global race relations. So he writes his opinions and his experiences of growing up in Britain and growing up Black in Britain, whilst he's commenting on like political histories, critical movements, and like identity politics in like an international sense. In Britain, you can't really talk about race without somebody bringing up class, so he specifically ties the two together to be able to address both and address them separately but also together in a way that tries to showcase how systemic racism is embedded in British systems. It's so fascinating because the way he writes, it's very like, obviously he knows what the hell he's talking about, he's done some research, like he throws in historical events like they're nothing, like you should already know what some of these things are, and you're like, I don't know that much about that specific country's history, thank you, but I will have to go look it up now. He does this with like so many countries around the world, but he also will call out his own biases and he'll call out his own story as being a very unique success story, because while he is delving into history and talking about British racism against Black people currently and throughout history, he's also aligning the whole thing with the autobiography of himself and his life, how it was for him to grow up Black in Britain in the decade that he did, what he's seen since then in different countries, how he's perceived, and how this all relates back to British colonies and where they were before, during, and after colonization. If you're British, this is definitely one to read. I would recommend this. If you're not British, still definitely read this. He does talk about what's happening in the States throughout the whole book. At some point towards the end, he makes a direct comparison to the UK and the US, aligning those histories and seeing the differences and being able to comment on how the two countries have arrived at the place that they've arrived. So I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars. I definitely feel like you need to be doing your research alongside. There won't be too many references for you. There are critical events or critical histories for certain countries, certain time periods that you will need to look up that he won't explain to you, so you'll have to do your own research on the side, so definitely keep that in mind when you're delving into this. Cool. So we're done our wrap up. I don't know how to end these videos except for saying thanks for watching this. Also, what's a reading sprint? This is not a Six of Crows stan account. It's more of an Inej stan account. Reading, there's always time for that. Filming, I don't know, might be time for that. Whiskey, I'm probably drinking whiskey at the same time as doing any of those things.